Well, thank you. It's great to be with you today back on campus at Regent. Some people have asked me before, if you couldn't teach at Pepperdine, what would you do? Now, perish the thought, I love being in Malibu, but my answer is always, I would see if I could teach at Regent. That's what I would want to do if Pepperdine wasn't an option. Just what you guys do here and who you are and what you're about is just quite inspiring. Don't have the same weather at this time of year right now, so I think that's why I think I'll stick with Malibu unless God calls me elsewhere. Well, what I want to talk to you today is about God calling you elsewhere. And I didn't at all intend to get involved in the developing world, ever, period, and had avoided that for much of my life. And over time, God worked on my heart in ways that I'll talk to you about today and ended up calling me and my family to Uganda where I met Henry, and you'll hear from Henry today. And then over time, we thought we just wanted to remember what was happening to us, what was happening in our lives, what was happening in Uganda and in Malibu. And so we decided we were going to write it down, and eventually somebody thought it was a good idea to put it in bound form. And so now there's a book. Some of you have already had it, but they put together a book trailer that is pulled from a documentary that was made in 14 and 15 about our work in Uganda, a lot about Henry's case. And so to start off, so you can get a mental picture of what it is we're talking about, I'm going to play the 2-minute trailer for the book that'll give you an image of what's really happening in Uganda.
I was arrested not knowing the exact point why they were arresting me. They are saying, you are a murderer. She ordered me to bury him alive.
No evidence was put on in Henry's favor.
We have reached the point of no return.
My name is Tomsime Henry, and I was charged with murder twice.
In March of 2013, I was given special permission by the Chief Justice of Uganda to actually represent Henry in court and argue his appeal before the Ugandan Court of Appeals.
The sentence in Uganda for murder, it can be 25 years.
None of the juveniles who would have testified were called to the stand.
This is nuts. Like, there's no way this should be going on.
I felt as if I was dead. I felt my heart was going off.
We really want this to be completely over and to have his name fully and finally cleared from any wrongdoing.
Being with each other. Not just for each other remotely, but with each other actually.
So we talk every week. How do we end our calls? Before we hang up?
Yeah, when we say I love you to each other, and we mean it.
Exactly. So I want to tell you today kind of how we ended up where we were and doing what we did and how God is working in all of this. One of the challenges in my life growing up is that I was addicted to control of my surroundings. I wanted to be comfortable. I wanted to be my life predictable. And so I had never gone on a mission trip of any shape, size, or form until I was 42 years old. And I say that not as a point of pride, but as a point of confession, that I wanted control of my surroundings. And I'd done a good job of building a life for myself. As I mentioned, I'm in Malibu. I've got a wonderful wife and 3 great kids, but was almost persuaded to go on various trips, almost persuaded to step outside my comfort zone. I think back to Mark 10, where we see the rich young ruler who had a very similar experience when he collided with the divine. You remember the story. He saw Jesus from afar, and he ran over to him, and he got on his knees, and he said, "Good teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" Jesus looks at him and says, "Okay. You've heard it said, don't commit adultery, don't steal, honor your parents, don't murder." And the man says, "I've done all of these things, but I want more. I want eternal life. What must I do to inherit eternal life?" And the Bible says Jesus looked at him and he loved him. Now, Jesus was already looking at him, of course, because he was talking to him So what the original translation means is he looked into him. He knew what he loved more than God. He said, I want to give you more. You're almost there. You just need to do one more thing to inherit eternal life. He says, anything, Lord. Jesus said, take everything you own, sell it, and give it to the poor, and follow me. And I will give you more than you can imagine. We know how that story ended. The man said, anything, Lord, anything but that. I would do anything but that. And the man went away sad because he had great wealth and he didn't want to trade it. The only time that anyone met Jesus face to face who was eager, who was reverent, and who was on target and went away sad. Because he wasn't willing to give up the one thing that was keeping him from having more. Well, in 2008, I was standing on the southern tip of Europe, Europa Point, Gibraltar, looking at the northern coast of Africa. And my oldest daughter, Jessica, says, she's 13 at the time, Daddy, are we going to Africa? I said, no, sweetie, we're traveling around Spain and Portugal, and we're flying to London for 6 months, where I'm going to be the teacher in the London program for the law school. She said, I know where we're going. Are we ever going to Africa? My response was, I'm not equipped to do anything Africa needs. And it didn't seem like a great vacation place at the time. So no, I have no plans to ever go to Africa. If this camera lens that my wife took could have focused over my shoulder into the heart of Africa, over 3,000 miles away, there was a scene that was unfolding that very month in Uganda. Uganda, for some of you who are going there, know where it is, but others of you won't know where it is. And Henry's going to tell you what was actually happening during that time that we were looking at Africa saying, we're never going to go there.
In 2008, we had someone looking after our cattle. He stole some money under my mom's mattress, which mom had kept for 2 years. It was a 2-year saving. And then he ran away. After some time, the neighbors got him, beat him to death. Mob, actually it was mob. They beat him to death. I was arrested. My mom was arrested, my dad, and my brother.
So I know none of this, of course, at the time, because I'm not going to Africa. I'm going to London. About 15 months later, we bring to Pepperdine's campus Baroness Carolyn Cox. She's a humanitarian member of the British House of Lords. And she was talking to a gathering like this of students, trying to encourage them to use their gifts and passions and time to serve those in greatest need. And at the end, she opened it up for questions, and someone raised his hand and said, I got a question for you. Is it better to travel halfway around the world to visit someone in need, or is it better to take the money you would spend traveling around the world and send it to them to meet their needs? I thought, that's an excellent question. And it's a better excuse not to go. Because I'm an encourager, I'm a supporter, I'm a funder of other people. And her response was unequivocal. She said, please go. And here's why. She said, if you travel around the world to somebody in their deepest need, first of all, they're going to know that someone knows about them and cared enough to come visit them in their situation. And when you're there, you're going to see the needs and you're not going to be able to turn away. And when you come back, you're going to have a massive ripple effect on those around you. And I said, what a great answer to the question. My Bible at the time said, there are they, Lord, send them. And so we sent more students. Said, look, listen to her. She's exactly right. You should go. And then the next month, National Christian Legal Society, I meet this guy. Some of you know who he is. And in fact, I think, Jeff, you were probably there. When Bob gave his talk at the national conference, and he talked about a lot of things. He said, love isn't just about supporting people or encouraging them or praying for them. If you love, you will do because love does. When he was done with his talk, I was done with my excuses. And my translation of the Bible changed back to what it had always been. Here am I, Lord, send me. I didn't know what I was going to do. But I knew, as part of his talk, there's a juvenile prison in Masindi, Uganda, where there are 20 kids waiting for someone to do something. They had been arrested, they're being held, without a lawyer, without a trial date. So 4 of us got together and got on a plane. Met actually John Napier, who's here. Raise your hand, John. John's one of our graduates. He was the first of what we call our Newt Bar Fellows. Travels to Uganda and lived for an entire year after graduation. So John was living there as a mediator, the first ever court annex mediator in the country of Uganda. John Napier, straight out of law school. Talk about something that you feel ill-equipped to do. But then he created a system along with the South African lawyer. The now Ugandans are doing this themselves. So on our way there, David Barrett was one of the lawyers with me. He says, this reminds me of the starfish story we've all heard in church. I go to church. I like stories. I know Samson and Delilah. I know David and Goliath. I know Jonah and the whale. I don't know the starfish story. So we're standing in the airport, in Nairobi airport, watching planes land. And he says, yeah, that reminds me of the starfish story. So finally I said, okay, the curiosity is killing me. What's the starfish story? He says, okay, here it is. Some of you know it. A man is walking along the beach, and he sees a figure off in the distance bending down and standing back up, and bending down and standing back up. So he walks over to the person. He sees a young boy who's bending over and picking up starfish and throwing them one at a time into the ocean. And the man says to the boy, well, what are you doing? And the boy says, the sun is up and the tide is out, and the starfish are stranded on the shore. Unless I do something to throw them back in, they're going to die in the sun. So the man says, well, how can you possibly make a difference? They're starfish as far as the eye can see. The boy bends over, picks one up, throws it in there, and finally says, I made a difference for that one, didn't I? Like, oh, I think I get the moral of this story. So this is January of 10, 1 month earlier, in December of 09. A new prisoner came to the Ihungu remand home where Henry was living. Henry at the time had been elevated to the position of Katikiro, which means prime minister in Swahili. 21 kids. They've got a juvenile government that runs the place because there's only one adult that stays out there, and she's only out there part of the time, and so he runs the place. This matron is hiring them out to local farmers as a chain gang to work in pocketing the money. And so this boy comes, new prisoner. He's got asthma. He gets very sick. She orders him beaten. She orders him buried alive. Henry says, I'm not going to bury him alive. Up to his neck. 2 other kids buried him alive. The next day, he tried to escape, was brought back, and the 4 most recent arrivals were ordered by the matron to give him 40 strokes, 10 strokes each on the buttocks. Later that day, he died of an asthma attack. The matron and the Katikiro, the prime minister, are charged with murder. So when I meet him, I walk up to this juvenile prison, Masindi, Uganda, meeting what I think is a double murder at the time. Well, we hadn't thought ahead to bring interpreters because the guidebook says Uganda's an English-speaking country. Well, that's true among the educated and elite in Kampala, but out in the rural areas, not that many people spoke English. And so as we walked up to the remand home, Henry was there sitting, waiting for us to arrive, really not knowing we were arriving. He's going to tell you kind of what he was thinking when the Americans walked up.
I had stayed in the prison for nearly 2 years. I was waiting, praying and fasting for God to do something for me. But the more I kept praying, the more actually problems could pile up. I kept praying, but the negativity situation also increased. I prayed, the second murder piled up. I was like, God, why is all this happening to me? Mom was telling me, please, Henry, keep strong. Stay strong, pray, keep fasting, never give up. God sometimes use bad situation to do good. I kept praying and fasting as well. Mom told me nothing lasts forever except the word of God. I kept really praying and fasting, and I was about to lose hope. When the Americans came, actually I was full of joy. I was very happy. Previously I was depressed. But when they came, I was like, yes, Lord, really you have showed me a point that you have now answered my prayers. So I was seeing hope coming back. I was really happy and full of joy.
So as we spent the week preparing cases for trial, there are 21 kids, 22 cases, 2 of them were Henry's. He was interpreting for us. And John and Another American non-lawyer was there doing the logistical work. And over the course of the week, I got to know Henry. One day, I took out my American cell phone and said, I'm going to show this guy what the technology looks like in the developed world. And I said, this is a phone. You can call people across the street or across the country or across the world. He looks at it and he said, this one is better than mine. Like, better than your what? It's better than my phone. He pulls out his, little 1.0 of American phones. And he hands me back my phone, and he pulls out of his pocket the business card I'd given him on the first day when I said, my name is Jim Gash. I'm a professor at Pepperdine. This is where I work. He says, does the number on this business card ring to that phone? That's when I knew, uh-oh. In my mind, this was a one-and-done volunteerism thing. I'm going to step in there. I'm going to see what I can do to help, and I can tell my kids, yes, you should go on a mission trip because just like Dad does. I paused longer than I should have, but eventually I said, no, actually, let me write down for you my cell phone number on the back of the card. So over the course of the week, we prepared these 22 cases, 21 kids for trial. Flew home about a week later, turned my cell phone on, 5 messages, the 5th of which said, hello, Mr. Jim. This is Henry. Thank you for coming to see us. I hope you had a good journey. And so at that point, I knew, okay, I'm in this. Next 6 weeks, we talk every other day or two as these kids are starting to get released, these 21 kids. Many of them were released because there never was any evidence against them. Some of them were released because they'd already served longer than the actual sentence. In April 2010, I went there in January of 2010, the first case against Henry, his brother, and his father went to trial and was dismissed on the first day. They said, sorry, we don't have any evidence against you. We've never had any evidence against you. You can go now. Brother goes home, father goes home from the adult prison. But Henry has to stay because his second case is still pending. A few weeks later, that case against Henry and the matron Rose goes to trial. One lawyer is appointed to represent both of them. She faces the death penalty if she's convicted. He faces a maximum of 3 years. The lawyer decides it's unlikely either of them will get convicted because the coroner's report just says he couldn't have died from the bruising on his buttocks. But nevertheless, doesn't call Henry to the stand, doesn't call any of the kids to the stand to testify what happened, instead calls the matron to the stand. And she testifies, I had nothing to do with anything. I don't know even what was going on. It was all the Katikiro, blame him. Both of them were convicted. I got back on the next plane and headed back to Uganda. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew someone I cared about deeply was in great distress and needed someone with him. And so over the course of the week, we prepared what's called a pre-sentence report in Uganda. Here are all the facts that you didn't know. The different judges sentencing, the magistrate judge is sentencing at the high court judge, and that judge ultimately, after reviewing the pre-sentence report, sentenced him to 1 year of probation and allowed him to go home, where he then enrolled in Bob Goff School of Restore International in Gulu. But while I'm there, this is in May of 2010, my second visit, never intended to take a second visit, the head of the high court, through John, sends word and says, they'd like to meet with you to talk with you about an idea they have. Okay, so the day before I took off, I meet with the head of the criminal division of the high court, and he says, 2 of your students last year, who were serving as our interns, said what you need to do is you guys need to have plea bargaining. That will move cases a lot more quickly. And so they did a report for them. The next year when I'm there, the judge says, we would like to study more about this plea bargaining. Do you have any recommendations? I said, come to Pepperdine. So they did. I should have clicked this on there. This is when we went back, that there were a handful of kids that were still there. And so the next month, in May of 2010, we had 6 Ugandan judges, the head of the high court, the head of the criminal division, and they drank from a fire hose for 6 days, learning from prosecutors and defense lawyers and judges and police officers and the FBI and prison officials what it looks like to move cases through the system much more quickly. And just before they left, they said, Jim, we've decided we're going to implement this. Will you come with us to pray somewhere so that we will have courage to do this? I said, I would love to. So I sat down and prayed with them. We all hold hands. A lot of hand-holding in Uganda. You hold hands, and Justice Lugaizi, the head of the criminal division, said, before you pray, can I ask you another question? Will you consider moving to Uganda to help us implement this? And I said to him, when I say to everybody who asks me to do something I don't want to do, I'll pray about it. So we started praying. And, I talked to my wife about it, and I won't repeat what she said. And she's like, what? My wife doesn't use any sort of language that suggested. But we did go back in July of 10, and then back in July of 11, we went back to a different prison. And said, you know what? If it worked in this one prison, let's go to a different juvenile prison. And when we went back the second time, we started working with Uganda Christian University, where your study abroad program is. And the lawyer there, Brian Dennison, said, you guys should meet the Uganda Christian Legal Fraternity, start working with them. So we did. So when our students were over there, we created teams, an American lawyer, an American law student, a Ugandan lawyer, and a Ugandan law student. Try and work together and train them on how to prepare cases for trial and how to move things forward. And then in January of 12, my wife and kids and I moved to Uganda. And as we were preparing to go, my wife was a prayer warrior, so she was asking God, bring us someone to do life with, someone that our kids will have a social structure with, something for us to do while Jim is doing work with the Ugandan judiciary on helping them with the juvenile justice structure. And so through a series of events that got orchestrated, he sent us a twin family. We're Jim and Jolene. They're Jay and Jill. Gash and Gregston. Our kids are Jessica, Joshua, and Jennifer. They're Jane, Jared, and Jake. They were moving to Uganda for 6 months. The week after we were moving to Uganda for 6 months, like, okay, yes, Lord, gotcha. Won't doubt you again. Thank you. And so they're a medical family. And so my wife and kids were asked, do you want to join us in doing the medical mission work while I was doing the law stuff? And so they were thrilled with that. My oldest daughter had always wanted to go into medicine, but she couldn't because she was deathly afraid of needles. Some of you may know what that is like. The first day of the clinic, Dr. J says to Jessica, our oldest, and Jake, his oldest, I need the two of you right now to get trained in drawing blood to test for HIV and malaria. Later that night, she said, Daddy, I just said a prayer and took a step toward my deepest fear. And she started drawing blood. And my younger kids started dealing drugs. They were the pharmacists. Now my oldest is a junior at Pepperdine pre-med, studying to be a doctor, because she took a step toward her darkest fear. She traded almost for more. Well, in the summer of 2010, just before we left, presented the judiciary with a report. In fact, one of the first, I think the first Regent intern, Abby Skeens, was over with us, working very closely with me on this. And we did a pilot program back in the same prison that Henry had gone to. He was in school and said, can I come with you to meet with these kids? Can I talk to them about life after prison? Can I share with them the hope that is in trusting in God during this deepest time? And so Henry went back in 2012 and met with him as we prepared this new pilot program that is now being utilized throughout the juvenile prisons. Well, in March of 2013, I had the opportunity to argue Henry's appeal in the Ugandan Court of Appeals. He'd already served his sentence, his probation was over, he was back in school, but it was critically important to both of us that his record be completely cleared. And through the relationships we had developed, the Chief Justice, under his authority in the Ugandan Constitution, granted me a one-time exemption to argue his case in the Court of Appeals. And so we argued the case in March of 2013. Well, a couple months later, we went to another adult prison. I shouldn't say another adult prison, our first adult prison, where we said, it's time to start moving this structured plea bargaining system into the adult realm. And so we prepared 70 cases, Ugandan lawyers and American lawyers, Ugandan law students and American law students, and just started working through. And then in 2014, the summer of 2014, we went to the maximum security prison and did 150 cases together. And so that's when the film crew came and started filming. So I'm going to show you a clip from the film. I can answer questions later more about the film, but this is what it looks like through the eyes of our students as they walk into a maximum security prison.
The categories of prisoners who are here are those who have committed very serious offenses. These offenses, among others, include acts of rape, acts of murder, acts of aggravated robberies, aggravated defilement, treason, terrorism, and other cases that follow that category.
We have no idea what any of these prisoners have done, and so we're just interviewing them blind, pretty much. We don't have their indictments or any of the trial records or anything. Hopefully we'll get that tonight.
Seems like the police have informed the prisoners that someone will be coming to talk with them. And we just got broken up into our teams, waiting to still find out who our Ugandan advocate will be. But yeah, just between us, it's basically 2 gates right now, and the prison itself, where all the prisoners are. So there's really going to be no separation. It's just jumping in there and trying to see if we can help these prisoners.
The Pepperdine students and American lawyers Jim has brought to Uganda are paired with a Ugandan lawyer and a Ugandan law student before meeting the prisoners. Because of a backlog of cases and an understaffed judicial system, the students and lawyers have no records to which they can refer and come into the situation not knowing any of the details of the alleged crimes. Interviewing over 100 prisoners for the first time, hoping to move the cases forward toward resolution through a court trial or an agreement reached outside of court called a plea bargain.
So we prepared 150 cases for trial, left them with the Ugandan lawyers who were going to be representing them. We went home, and the Ugandans started resolving those cases. They did all 150, and they kept going. The next summer, we went back in 2015 and did 4 prisons on the eastern border of Uganda, and had a dozen lawyers and a dozen law students on both sides of the pond, working together to try and deliver the kind of justice they seek to deliver to their people. And now the Ugandans are spreading this throughout the entire country in all of the prisons and all of the regions, and have done 2,000 cases since we have gone. And so watching them grab hold of this vision of wanting to do something better for their people, figuring out how to go about doing that, being supported, but really taking ownership of it is just a joy to be a part of and to watch. And then on June 19th, 2015, we got an email, and it said, the ruling from the Court of Appeals is ready. This is 7 years after Henry had been arrested in May of 2008, 5 years after we had met. And so, unlike in the United States, they decided they're going to read all the rulings there, and if you want to be there when it happens, great. They just sent us an email with the link after they had read it. And so I got him on Skype, and we read it together. And so the film crew came and filmed it, so you can see kind of ultimately how this went and what it looked like.
Hello, are you there?
Hello?
Hello, can you see me?
Yeah, I'm there.
I can't see you. Yeah, push the camera button so I can see your face. So we got the ruling from the court. Let me read the portion that is the most important part. He says, it says, "We therefore find that it was not possible in the circumstances of this case for the same advocate to have ably and fairly represented both the appellant and the co-accused, Rose and Parway, without causing prejudice to the case of one of them. On that account, we hereby quash the conviction and set aside the sentence imposed upon the appellant by the Children's Court Vicinity, the fact that he has already served the same notwithstanding. For the same reason, we rule out in order of a retrial of the appellant." The court decided that the conviction was in violation of the Constitution, and therefore it has been quashed and nullified. It's over, you won.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Have a great day.
You're welcome. I had a very good client to represent, someone who was innocent and it needed to be proven innocent, and I'm glad we had the opportunity to work together to make that happen. Yeah.
I've been just waiting, praying.
Waiting and praying. That's two things we've gotten used to doing since we met each other, huh? So there will be no new trial.
Yeah.
It's all over. It's now over. There's no appeal to the Supreme Court. You are a free man. You are exonerated. All of the charges against you have been dropped and dismissed. So Henry, come up and tell them what you're doing now and what this ruling meant for you.
Okay, as really you have seen, I was full of joy. I was very happy. Verbal, I can't explain how I was feeling, but I was really happy. I was studying. I'm a medical student right now. I was studying, but because I had a conviction, I was like, even if I'm to study, I won't graduate at all. Because in Uganda, even if you have studied, but you have a conviction, you are not allowed to practice. So I was studying, but my hope actually was going away still. I was like, I want to become a doctor, but I have a conviction. How will this one work out? It's like, God help me. So when I received this call, actually, that I was exonerated, I was like, my God. This was really overwhelming. I was full of joy. And now I'm in my second year of medical school. Yeah.
So as I look back on this whole 6 years and look forward into what I don't know what's coming, I remember being the man in that story, the starfish story, thinking there is a sea of problems. There's people stranded on the shore. I don't know what to do, and I'm not equipped to do it, so I don't do anything. And then for a while, God granted me the grace to play a role and be the boy in that story and trying to help some people gain their freedom. But as I look back now, I realize that I'm not the man in the story, and I'm not the boy in the story. I'm the starfish in that story. I've been stranded on the sea of apathy and indifference and feeling like there was nothing I could do, just needing to be thrown back into the sea of indifference, the sea of obedience, and try to figure out what God had for me. And the toughest part of all of this is to try to figure out how to step beyond your fear. And I used to think it was the fear of failure that was holding me back. That if I took the step of faith and nothing happened and there was no results, then I'm not sure I could handle it. But I realize now that the thing that was more fear-inducing was the fear of success. Because if you take a step of faith and God is there and He has work for you that's different than you've created for yourself, then everything changes. Then you end up moving to Africa and you end up getting involved in something you don't think you have any idea what to do. I'm a torts professor. What am I doing international criminal law for? So you wonder, am I equipped to do this? As I was standing on the shores of Europe looking at Africa saying, there's nothing I'm equipped to do. What I didn't realize, and what some of you have already realized years before me, is God doesn't call the equipped. He equips the called. And we're all called. And so I encourage you, figure out what it is that's holding you back from this more that you're seeking, holding you into almost and saying, what is it, God, that you want me to do? Let me take a step toward that. So if you want to read more about the story, we've only been able to share with you a little bit about what happened. We'd love to share this with you in the book, but we'd also love to answer any questions you have in the time that we have remaining. Yes.
Yes, sir. So, working with the Center for Global Justice, we often see that there's a lot of students who come through here very, very eager to go and do this type of work internationally. And I was wondering how your experience is just in, whatever law you were practicing or even in tort law, how did that help prepare you for what God eventually had?
It's a really good question. As I mentioned before about being equipped, I didn't realize that I was equipped to do anything in a juvenile prison in Uganda. But when you go in there and you see, okay, what do I need to do? I need to interview witnesses. And I need to figure out what the law is. And I need to be able to prepare a summary that flows law fact analysis that you learn how to do in law school and realize I actually am equipped. There are a lot of law students say, what I want to do when I graduate from law school is go work internationally and have an impact on the world. And that's great to be able to do, but you have to get equipped first. You need to figure out, it's great to be trained in law school, but figure out how to actually practice law. Go and work in a prosecutor's office or in a law firm or in any other sort of legal capacity and get the tools that are necessary to make a difference when you get there. And so I don't want to discourage you from seeking your dreams right away. There's plenty of opportunities to get involved now. But if you want to have a longer-term impact, make sure you gather the tools together in advance. Yes, Gloria.
This question is for Henry. So what do you think is the main thing that you learned? Like, I guess considering your spiritual journey and learning how to trust God through all of this, I guess what would you say was the main lesson, I guess, out of all of this?
Okay, when I was still young with my mom and dad, actually mom used to tell us to pray and fast and believe in God as well, which we did, but we are doing it just on the surface. Just praying, yes, because mom was saying we should pray, but there was no impact because we had not experienced anything like trouble. But when I got arrested, I was praying and fasting and things were not working out. And I wasn't having any hope of getting released actually, because no one was there to fight for me at all. Mom had started selling everything at home. She sold all the cows we had. So I was not even afraid of like going back to school. There was no hope at all. But what mom used to tell me, when I tried to think about it and even continuing to pray, and all of a sudden, my prayers were answered. I didn't know Jim. I didn't know like much about United States. Nothing I knew about all the things. But God worked out. Everything now came to like, I realized that God was there for me. And hope was brought forward to me. I became really free, which I never expected. I was like, yes, God, you do exist and you work among the people. I was like, so the lesson I learned really, that God is the real. God helps in whichever situation you are in. If you are in a hard situation, just know that after that hard situation, there is a good situation ahead of you. So I was like, yeah, God exists. And I increased and intensified the trust in God. Yeah.
Gash, your story is full of a lot of momentous decisions, I would say, like sequences of them. And a lot of folks that I talked to who are Christians didn't feel called to something that they previously couldn't imagine something greater, which I think God has for all of us. And from your perspective, how would you describe someone who is feeling a calling like that, maybe on the precipice of a big decision? What, as a Christian, is your decision-making process?
Yeah.
Or whether that calling is actually from God, how does He confirm that, and how would you advise others facing it?
Well, what I would say first is, behind every moderately successful man is a very surprised woman. And I married up, and so my wife and I, whenever there's these decisions, spend a lot of time in prayer and trying to figure out what is it that God has for us, and are we, is this the right chapter in our life in order to take this step? And other people have said when I confess that, God's probably been calling me for a long time. I just have been refusing to answer. It could be that God was saying, you know what? I've got something for you. I'm going to prepare you first. I'm going to get you in a situation to use that. But in some ways, that's rationalization, and that's probably my spiritual gift of rationalization. But it's spending a lot of time in prayer and trying to figure out what are the needs that are out there, and am I equipped to meet them? And when I say am I equipped to meet them, am I willing to let God equip me to meet them? Now, if there was a need for cataract surgery, I'm not the guy. I've not been equipped to be in that position, and so I think you need to figure out what you're equipped to do. But it was a question of developing relationships with a country, with a judiciary that has deep desires and needs, and then the relationships that I have with other people who can fulfill those. So when they come to the United States, connecting with prosecutors and judges, etc. We've got a group from Guatemala coming in 2 weeks. They'd heard there's some things going on in Uganda. They'd done plea bargaining. Can we come get trained? I'm like, yes, but it's not going to be me. I have relationships with people, and so now Uganda has led to Guatemala, and they're now training people in Zambia and in Rwanda. So the long answer to your simple question, a lot of time in prayer. And don't be afraid to get on your knees, figuratively or literally, and just say, okay, Lord, I'm here, send me. Equip me the way you need me to be equipped, but also give me the kind of confidence. As I said in the book, as some of you will read, had I known when I first got on the plane where my life was going to go, I don't think I would have had the courage to take this next step. And so just take it one step at a time. Don't try to figure out, well, this is going to lead to this, lead to this, lead to this. There's somebody in front of me who needs my help, and I can be helpful. For 42 years, I was writing my story. I'd written 42 chapters, and I'd written them pretty well, I thought. I was in Malibu. I had a great wife. I had wonderful kids. I had a great job. And God was playing his role well as a supporting actor. He showed up when I needed him. He carried the themes of the film or the story. I was worshiping him. But when I finally said, okay, here am I, Lord, send me, the process of saying, okay, you write this story. I've written a good story, but I know that you can write a better one. And so that's the toughest part, is saying, okay, God, take over. You're the writer. You're the director. I don't know what the next chapter is going to look like, and that's hard for me to not know what the next chapter is going to look like. But I know that you've written the greatest story ever told, and I know that you love me, and I know that you're going to provide for me and my family in whatever ways that you have. And so I'm still struggling with that. I'll admit that I struggle with that daily. But trying to say, okay, Lord, your will, your will, your will, and taking this step of faith. And so that's what I encourage you to do. Yes, Ernie?
Can you just comment a little bit more on sort of the status of due process? I mean, we talked a little bit about this, and a lawyer being appointed to represent two people, and then sometimes no evidence. And
right.
Really how maybe plea bargaining is changing that and giving a bit more due process to criminal defendants.
Yeah. Well, that was the point on appeal that we prevailed on. The court just cut straight to the chase and says you can't give due process when one lawyer represents two people with divergent stories, outcomes, etc. But in Uganda now, they have embraced the idea of, okay, we're going to do this. And we're going to do this, which means we got to jump in much deeper. And so they're in the process of now of creating legislation that will give people lawyers upon arrest. Right now in Uganda, according to the current law, you get a lawyer when you're charged with a crime, but it doesn't say when. The practice is you get that lawyer 30 days before your case is scheduled for trial. You're put into a session, and 30 days before your case is scheduled for a trial, and that's when you get a lawyer. And that can be 3 years from arrest or 5 years from arrest. And during that time, you're just waiting for someone to do something. And they understand that that's not right. They understand that's not fair. And so what they're trying to do is create a system, and that's our goal, is to empower them to create a system where you get a lawyer right away. And when you get a lawyer right away, then those who are guilty, who are willing to accept responsibility, can plead guilty, get a sentence, and start serving it. And those who are behind them, who are claiming innocence, can actually move up in line and get to trial earlier. And so the plea bargaining system is not only getting people who are innocent to trial earlier, but it's also getting people who have accepted responsibility in front of a court earlier and starting to serve that sentence. It's also getting conviction rates way up. Because when you're arrested and 5 years later you go to trial, where's the evidence? Where are the witnesses? In Uganda, they don't have this sort of infrastructure to be able to contact people and bring people to court. And so the conviction rate is about 16% for trials that actually go to trial. And now it's going up dramatically, not just because of the plea bargaining, but the trials are coming more quickly as well. And so they really, really care. There's a group coming in about 5 weeks, 5 Ugandans embedded within the LA Federal District Court to learn how to manage cases, the case management. They're going to be learning how to move files through a system in an expeditious way. And we're working with them on appellate mediation and all sorts of various ideas. And Baylor University says, we want to do Zambia. we've got great relationships in Zambia, and so heading out to Baylor next week to talk to them about here's how you can start, and there's just countries that are eager for assistance, and love to work with you guys in Uganda and wherever else that you guys are interested in going. So I would love to figure out a way whether to see if your students can be involved in our annual prison project, because we're going back in June. And so we'll talk about that. There's a lot of logistical challenges related with moving 48 people throughout a country with security, but I think it would be fun to kind of connect the schools more closely.
Before we take more questions, there's some classes, so if anyone needs to go, this is your time, you can go. We're gonna stay for at least 15 minutes.
We'll stay as long as you guys need to.
Ask a few more questions, but if you need to go, now's the time, and there's also a time to buy the book out front.
And Henry there's only a few people that are going to get his book signed by Henry while he's in country.
Exactly, so there's a chance to get your book signed as well. So please go if you need to go, and then we'll take other questions.
Sure.
Are you running into any issues with the U.S. State Department in interacting with nations that we have either we're not happy with the way their legal system is running, or the fact that you're operating kind of in a faith-based
right.
And interacting with people that are articulate about their faith in ways that are administrative and the like?
It's a good question, and so far so good. Uganda passed some legislation a little while ago that was unpopular in the world, and particularly in the United States. And we decided we were just not going to get involved in that issue. The work that we're doing in prisons isn't affected by this anti-homosexuality legislation. But the State Department, the embassy in the U.S., we've not done a whole lot of work with them. When we come there, we say, here's what we're doing, here's where we're going. And they're very excited and supportive and eager for us to do something. They have some skepticism as to whether the Ugandans can actually do it. My response to that is you need to get to know them better, because there's some people here that are phenomenal that are going to make this happen and are making it happen. We haven't actually done some work in Congo, the DRC that's nearby. I think that would be tougher, and I think the State Department would be cautious about us even going in there and trying to do stuff. But so far, they've only been encouraging and supportive. We haven't sought funding yet from them, but at some point we'd like to, because it's a bandwidth question. We can do so much, but we can't do a whole lot more without resources. Yeah. Yes?
Okay, do you have any advice for people who are on the opposite end? Okay, so I'll just speak for myself. So I know that I want to do international stuff, and my brain is like, God, you can do this and this, and I'm like really excited about everything, and I think that I tend to do too much maybe. So I don't know, I'm trying to get my mind to a place where I know that it's not about me, and it's really just about serving others. But I don't know, I guess.
Yeah. Well, that's a challenge, because you think, as I look at other countries, Zambia, it's like, okay, I can't do both. I've got to be able to focus, try to figure out where God can use you best, and then help you equip others to do that work. And so I know your mind's going a million different ways. I encourage you to do one thing really well, as opposed to a whole lot of things moderately well. Because then, if I was just kind of dabbling in Henry's case as opposed to pouring into it, we may not have had the same result. So I would say pick what is the most important, most compelling thing to you, and say, God, pour me into this, and then from there figure out what doors open. But I admire you for having that challenge of, I want to do a whole lot, rather than my challenge of saying, that's for other people to do. I'm encouraged by your desire to be used right now. And my generation, when we grew up, what we knew about Africa was that Sally Struthers, a former TV actress, would get on TV and say, there's this Ethiopian child with a distended belly and flies all around him. What you need to do, here's your call to service. You need to send money. And so we would send money. And your generation says, forget the money, send me. I want to go out there and do that, because you see what the needs are. The internet is a great thing, mostly. And then there's the ability to travel to places. And you guys are eager to get involved. And your generation believes that you can actually end injustice. And I think you're right. Yes?
You mentioned when you were speaking that it's important for people to become equipped to go do these things. As knowledge, I'm actually one of the people that are going to Uganda this summer.
Excellent.
What would you, do you have any recommendations for good sources just to, so for me, it's a big concept of not only am I trying to learn American law, but now thinking fast forward into the summer, I'm going to be working with Uganda law. Or do you have any good recommendations? I was like, this is a great starting place to get some good basic knowledge to work from this. You will be able to see, okay, this is where I need to go delve into more in-depth study.
Yeah. So what I would do is I would start with really three sources. The Daily Monitor newspaper, online, the New Vision newspaper, the two Uganda national newspapers. And if you just start reading those every morning, just scanning the headlines, you see what's happening in the country. 3 days from now, their national elections take place. It's every 5 years. And so there's going to be some potential unrest there. Getting a lay of the land, who are the characters, what are the potential issues that are happening there. So those are the two, get acculturated to what Uganda is and what they care about. And then the third place is a place called ULII, ULII.org. It's got a lot of the laws there, and so I would read that. But it's hard to say that you can really prepare for going into that. Because you can't, it's like reading the Code of Virginia, all the laws. You don't know which ones are going to come up. But if you're paying attention and doing well in your 1L year and learning how to do law fact analysis, then that's what you're going to be doing. And you'll be able to find the law. They're descended from the British just like we are, and so it's common law, very similar structure. I don't know, John, do you have any recommendations for what did you do before you spent a year there in terms of reading?
Yeah, honestly, I would encourage you to read the Uganda Constitution, just to have some kind of framework. Jim's right, you're not going to be able to pour through all the laws. Bob Goff is famous for, in his talk, when he talks about first going to Uganda, he's like, I went to the bookstore and I bought all Uganda law, all 2 books of it,
Yeah.
That's a little bit of hyperbole on his part, to be honest. So what Jim is saying, you are actually going to be far more equipped than you realize. If you are, which I'm assuming you are, everyone's here, if you're paying attention, if you're really learning the basics of our law here, it's based off of the same thing. There are obviously a lot of derivatives, but you're going to be far more equipped than you realize. Reading through the Ugandan Constitution is just going to be good education for you. It's a lot longer than ours, just so you know. But you'll have some framework, and then again, as you come through, you're going to say, okay, what are the issues? Then you can go find the laws that apply to each particular case. So I think Jim's advice is actually great. One of the best things you can do is look at the Monitor and the New Vision, so you can get acclimated and really have a sense. And then when you get there, talk to everybody. Take taxi drivers, talk to Ugandans, ask them. I was just, when I first got there, I was just so fascinated by what was going on. And I was asking everybody, and then I'd start to talk to other people, and I'd say, oh, well, what about this political party and what's going on here and here? And they'd just be like, what? It doesn't take a lot, because most people who come there, especially Mzungus, foreigners, aren't necessarily asking those questions.
Yeah, and develop relationships with people you work for, because they're going to be really eager to learn to learn more about your culture as well. But don't just make this a one-way thing. Ask them about their lives and get to know who they are, and they will love to invite you into their lives.
Thank you.
Yes.
Is there a predominant religion there, Christianity? What impact would that have?
About 80% of the country self-identifies as Christian. About 15% is Muslim, and about 5% is a variety of other things. They have some East Indians that are from the country of India there, and so there's some Hindu stuff. The tension that we often see in the world between Christianity and Islam is much lower there. There isn't this inherent suspicion of each other. One of my friends in Uganda, a taxi driver that John introduced me to, his wife, until just recently, was Muslim, and he's Christian. I said, well, how does that work? He said, what do you mean? I said, well, isn't it strange being, married to somebody? He said, we worship the same God. We just worship him on a different day. I'm like, well, that's one way of looking at it. But there's not that underlying suspicion and tension that's there. They seem to get along with each other pretty well. That being said, a couple countries up and over, Somalia has got some al-Shabaab influence that occasionally does some bad stuff. And so always, if you're going to be over there, always be keeping one browser on the State Department's website to see what sort of warnings there are. But if you travel in groups, if you pay attention to your surroundings, it's quite safe. My wife and kids were there for 6 months with me, and we didn't worry at all about our safety. Yeah, John, question?
Can I just say something else a little bit to go along with something you were saying earlier, and really to everybody here. I didn't really realize going to law school what I was going to come out with. And no matter where you are, if you're still in your first year, second year, third year, wherever you are, or you're you have an enormous power, frankly, with a law degree. Not just in the U.S., which you're going to quickly realize if your relatives haven't already started asking you for legal advice.
It's coming.
And everybody you come in contact with. A lot of America don't like lawyers because they have a deep opinion of them, but they love them when they need them.
Just like a dentist.
A lot of power. You, as a lawyer, you are considered to be on the inside. You know things that people don't know. And you have a lot of power, not just in the U.S. too. When you go abroad and you do this kind of work, you have a base of knowledge, even after your first year of law school, to be able to make, it was first year law students who finished and just suggested who are you to the Ugandan judge, the Justice Muganzi, head of the criminal court. And here we are, an entire country's legal system is reformed because of 2 first year law students who saw something and suggested it. So what Jim said earlier about being equipped, and if you're looking at doing this work long term, I think that's great advice. But you also need to understand that you are, even now, you have a certain power and you are equipped to do things that you never thought possible. I've had friends, not only what I had the opportunity to do, but I have all sorts of other friends that have been in Uganda and done some ridiculous things they never should have been able to do. Working with the Capital Markets Authority, working with the legal system. And these are people who aren't even lawyers, You never get that opportunity here. So you have opportunities in countries abroad that you'll never get here. But you, especially if you're putting your faith and your trust in the Lord, He's going to put you in situations far beyond your ability in some sense, and He is going to equip you to do what He's called you to do. So I would just encourage you all to not be afraid when you go into situations. You're going to be in over your head. I was over my head. Jim was over his head. Henry was definitely over his head in so many ways, But look what the Lord's done with Henry and with Jim, and I can look at what the Lord's done in my life. And the biggest thing is fear is just a killer. Fear is a killer. It's not worth spending your time being afraid, frankly, of anything other than fearing the Lord. So I'm just saying this just kind of as an overarching, realize you are equipped now as law students. When you have your law degree, just in general for the rest of your lives, you're going to have a power, and I would encourage you to use that and to continually think about how you can serve other people with that power, because it is far bigger than you realize now.
One of the speakers that came to our house, we have a Wednesday night Bible study that meets at our house of law students. In the fall of 10, we had 2 people from an organization called 60 Feet, with whom Abby Skeens was working with as an intern in Uganda. And this is before my wife and I decided we were going to move to Uganda. And one of them said to our students, and it was really convicting to me, "What are you doing right now that requires faith?" And I go to church, I love my wife, I'm faithful to her. What are you doing right now that actually requires you to have faith in God? How are you trusting Him in some tangible way? And that was quite convicting to me. And I wouldn't be able to say that was the reason we said yes, but that was part of the whole thought process of, do we really trust God? Or are we people who are, the Sunday Christians who worship and love and do all those other things within our bubble, within the safety and comfort? So ask yourself, what are you doing that requires you to trust in God?
One more question. We might have time for one more. Anything else? Going once. Twice. All right. Please thank our speakers.